Na mtazamaji, kama nilivyokueleza hapo awali ni kwamba hivyo ndivyo hali ilivyo katika msafara wa Raila Odinga akiwa ametoka maeneo ya Lavington anaelekea eneo moja maeneo ya Kawangware ili kuweza kuwahutubia wananchi, lakini hatujui baada ya hapo ataelekea wapi. Lakini katika siku ya leo amekuwa mchache wa maneno, amesimama karibu sehemu tatu akizungumza vitu vitatu: gharama ya maisha, na akimalizia na sava kufunguliwa. Msafara unaelekea wapi? Watafika mjini au la? Kumbuka maafisa wa polisi wameimarisha usalama mjini na karibu na mji huu wa Nairobi. Yvonne Okwara, chana kupezamu uweze kuendelea kuzungumza na Wakenya.
Shukran sana Rashid Abdalla kwa kazi uliyoifanya. We now move on to the English broadcast of what is now the second day and the second week of protests that are being run by Azimio leaders. They have several demands that is going on today. Our English broadcast begins now. Good afternoon. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole, and we have our guests here. We'll be getting to them in a moment as we take a look at what's been taking place. Well, a lot has obviously happened from last week's protest to today, and now the pictures you're seeing on your screen are, of course, scenes from Kawangware that we need to take a look at. So Raila Odinga, of course, now joining the protesters who've been at it for a few hours now. So the pictures that you're seeing on your screen now, I believe, are live from Kawangware as the protests and the demands continue, and as government and security officials remain firm on that. Good afternoon. Welcome to this broadcast. We will be taking a look at the state of the nation, the legal procedures that have been proposed. With me this afternoon, you'll be hearing from Stephen Obiro, who's from the Federation of Kenya Employers, that's FKE. Eric Theuri, who's the president of the Law Society of Kenya, will also be speaking with us. And we have George Msamali, who's a security expert. We'll be talking about the scenes we're seeing, the responsibility of the security officials, the responsibility of the protesters, and of course, the conduct of the security officials, which is something that has come into context. We'll also be talking about the state of the economy, the cost of living, as well as a few developments that have taken place. I mean, since last week, there's been an increase in power tariffs. So we'll take a look at some of those in just a moment from now. Maybe we can begin, even as we take a look at what's happening on your screens. I just want to thank my guests, gentlemen, for coming in and joining us this afternoon. Stephen, let me begin with you. It's second day of protests, another week. You know, what does this mean for employers and employees and the state of the economy, as it were?
Yvonne, it is a challenging time for the employers, the enterprises, and even the employees in Kenya now. If you look at the business environment today around the city and in most areas where we have had the protests, the business is depressed. And that means that there is a lost productivity and it goes on with a lot of cost to the employers. Because at the end of the day, you have fixed costs, you have to pay your salaries, the salaries for your staff, you have to meet others' fixed costs, yet there is no production happening. So it is something that is really, really depressing for employers. Looking at a country that one of our key challenges that we have is employment. It is important that whatever we do supports creation of employment and doesn't depress our businesses. And so the protests are having a negative effect when it comes to the employment, when it comes to the way our industries are working. Many of the employees, they are also living in uncertainty because you don't know what is going to happen during the protest, so you're not sure whether you should be at the workplace or not. And even when you're at the workplace, you are really not giving your all because you're still wondering what is going to happen. And you look at our transport system in the country, and when we have this protest, so there's a really depression that is happening in the employment sector, Yvonne.
Okay, and when we take a look at the events, at least so far today, George, what would you say from a security standpoint? Look at the pictures that we are seeing on your screens in terms of how the security officials have conducted themselves today. Has it been any different from what we saw last week?
Yvonne, freedom to protest is a cornerstone to any liberal society. But it becomes very difficult now when it gets to policing this kind of situation, whereby you realize that the police need to plan for this kind of protests. Because basically what the police are supposed to do is not to stop the protest, but to facilitate the protests. The police should not focus on crowd control, but they should focus on crowd management, because this is something that is enshrined in the Constitution, and they know very well their role when it comes to matters of dealing with protests.
So, George, crowd control and crowd management, what's the difference?
These are two different things. When you're doing crowd control, you're dealing with a crowd that is rioters, for example. But when you're managing a crowd, is when you allow people to picket, you allow people to protest in a peaceful way. But what we've realized with the Kenya police is anytime there's a protest, they turn it, they turn it into a rioters mob. They treat it as a riot, not a protest. And this is where the problem is. And this is exactly what is causing the mayhem that you're witnessing currently in Nairobi, Kisumu, Homa Bay, and Migori.
Okay.
It's not supposed to be like that.
And we will talk a little bit more about, the role of the security in a moment with Eric. But George, is there not also a responsibility on the part of the protesters? Because that's the sort of conversation that we're having now. So you have the security officials who are supposed to ensure, a secure environment in which people can picket if they so wish to use that method to express themselves. What happens on the part of, say, the organizers of a protest, the protesters themselves? Like what we are seeing now, what is their responsibility?
Even it's very clear that what the law says is that police must be notified. And from the Azimio side, they said, yes, we went to the police and notified them that we're going to have these protests, and in particular areas of the city. So what the police are supposed to have done is to have dialogue with the organizers. They give conditions, certain conditions. If it's the CBD, will tell you, you don't get to the CBD. Yeah? They come with conditions, and these conditions are supposed to be observed by the planners of the protest. But in this case, we saw the Inspector General of Police going live and saying that I have banned these protests, which is not anywhere confined within the Constitution of Kenya. And in such a situation, you'll find that the police do not plan for anything. They just go there saying, we are going to deal with this crowd. We are going to deal with the crowd as a rioters mob, which is not the case. So both the police and the planners have a role to play into ensuring that the protest is peaceful. And in this case, they must agree on certain modalities that are supposed to be observed during the protest. But in this case, you'll find that we have one side saying the protests are illegal. We have another side saying that, no, this is constitutional, and we'll get out there and protest. So in this confusion, you will find that things will get out of hand. And when we have this kind of situation, as he has said, businesses will suffer. There's a lot of disruption of communities, a lot of disruption in businesses, and basically the economy is going to suffer because of this, as opposed to when we have an organized protest where people will be allowed to march. Given timings, you are told you will march from, let's say, 8 to 10, and then everybody should disperse. This is how it's supposed to be planned, but not now one side taking a hard stand and the other side also doing the same. You see what is happening now.
Yeah. Eric, Japhet Koome, the Inspector General of Police, yesterday said the protests are banned and therefore illegal.
Yeah, I also heard the same, and clearly he has no power to ban this kind of demonstrations and assembly, and everyone has a right to picket and present any petitions to public authorities as enshrined under Article 37 of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. So I think, and I would want to just agree with what the other speakers have spoken about, the inconsistency in the messaging and the manner in which the police are handling these riots is, or rather this protest is creating a situation that is causing tension and confusion in the country.
Let's talk about, the process of that. Article 34 of the Constitution allows people to peaceably and unarmed, picket, present a petition, and of course notify the authorities. Now, what is that procedure like? Because what we were hearing is, remember last week, Azimio then tried to give their notification. They went to, the Nairobi police boss, and they were told, no, you must go back to the officer commanding station. Has the right procedure been followed in terms of notification? And then what happens thereafter? After they said they did that, then we saw a response now not from the OCS, but now coming from the Inspector General of Police yesterday, who talked about, these protests being illegal. Has the right procedure been followed, Eric?
The only requirement is that there be a notification to the police that a protest is going to be held, and communication in terms of the routes that are supposed to, the protesters are supposed to follow. So once that has been complied with, there is no other legal requirement that has to be met. And I think that's where we are saying that the issue here is that there is a political response to the question of the protest that is making, that is causing confusion in the entire system. If you look back, I think the other week, the Communication Authority attempted to censure media stations for airing the demonstrations. Mm-hmm. You are almost tempted to think that the manner in which...
Sorry, Eric, I just want to cut in a little bit, allow the interjection. Let's just listen to what Raila Odinga is saying as he addresses the crowds there. I don't know if he's speaking.
Tumesema kama Azimio, gharama ya maisha yarudi chini, bei ya unga rudi chini, mafuta rudi chini, kodi ya nyumba rudi chini, karo ya shule rudi chini. Mnaunga mkono na saba yafunguliwe. Mnaunga mkono. Asanteni sana. Tuko na mazakara na wazakara, tuko na hujuma mama, tuko na paranya, tuko na kiani. Asanteni sana.
That's Raila Odinga, Azimio leader, speaking to the crowds, of course, just acknowledging which leaders are present there, talking about bei ya unga. Sorry, I cut you off, Eric, because you were talking about, the procedure that has been followed and what happens thereafter.
Yes, so as I was saying, it's a question about the government response mm-hmm. to the demonstrations that, in my view, is creating a lot of confusion. The first one is an attempt to curtail what are very clear provisions of the constitutions without any reasonable or legal basis. This has come in the form of those pronouncements by the IG that he has banned the demonstration. The other attempt that was done by the Communications Authority mm-hmm. to try and censure media from airing the protests as they go on. And so you see that there is a consistent messaging from the government that it is keen on curtailing the right to protest. And so therefore it becomes extremely difficult to start talking about the question of responsibility, because rights also comes with a responsibility. And so in a proper setup, the security forces should be engaging the organizers, agreeing with them on the parameters of how the demonstrations are going to be conducted. If the demonstrators say that they have a petition that they wish to present to any public institution, then those issues are discussed, and the police, if they have any security concerns, are able to say, you know, we have this kind of concerns, how do we deal with all these issues? And so the parties are able to discuss and agree. But the strong arm language that the government is employing in responding to these issues is what is creating all this confusion that we are currently witnessing.
All right, let's talk about, you know, the issues at hand that are being raised, you know, by the protesters, which is the state of the economy, the cost of living, you know, the state of the nation generally. From where you sit, Eric, what's your assessment of the state of the nation? Let's talk about the wider issues, you know, at play here. What's your sense of where the nation is and whether, you know, what we need to do to, I mean, you know, we're a nation in building, right? We're not where we need to be, certainly, regardless of whichever way you look at it or whichever sort of political formation you support, we would still like things in our country to be better. What is the state of the nation in your view right now? And are those issues being addressed by this protest?
I think we're in a very precarious situation as a country, one taking into context the global challenges, global economic challenges that both countries are facing. But we also have a very unique challenge in this country, and that is of a high youth bulge that is either unemployed or underemployed, and so therefore going through a lot of frustrations. The business environment also is undergoing a lot of frustrations because of issues that are not just local, that are also global in nature. But for me, the most critical thing has been the response of the government, and that is where we are having a problem. Mm-hmm. Because when the government came in, they indicated that they want to undertake certain austerity measures, the presumption being that they wanted to manage public debt, manage how usage of resources so that they can redirect them to sectors that are going to spur economic growth. Yeah. And that is very good on paper. But what has been its implementation? The implementation has been in the opposite. The implementation has been in creating and blotting the institution of government unnecessarily. It has been in taking money from other ministries that were offering or are to offer critical services to the public, and putting a lot of that money into the office of the president and the deputy president for use and entertainment, for purchase of motor vehicles. So every action that has been taken by the government has been completely contrary to the public assertions that they intend to engage in austerity measures.
Wouldn't some say that this is a little early, perhaps, you know, give some time for policy and plans and visions to kick in? Like you said, some of the issues are also global, you know, in nature, as opposed to just sort of local decisions that have been taken in the past that have brought us to where we are.
You see, the issue is you actually are able to gauge how an administration is going to behave, and that's why sometimes you find that there is this fixation with 100 days in office. What are you going to do in 100 days in office? Of course, it's a short time.
Is that reality? Is that realistic now that we take a look at it?
It is a short time.
Okay.
But why there is some sort of an assessment after 100 days is that people are able to now demonstrate the kind of actions that they intend to take. So what is the messaging that we all know from the government? is that it intends to take austerity measures. Those were the first public pronouncements.
Yeah.
So the question would be, have they done anything that shows you that they are implementing austerity measures? If, for example, they had said that the office of the president consumes this much, and we are looking at some of this and we are saying that they are probably not so important at this particular time, that this money can be redirected perhaps to purchasing medicine or something else, that sends you the correct message that actually the government is intending to comply and enforce austerity measures.
Yeah.
But if it says one thing, and if the government is speaking from both sides of the mouth, then you have a problem in understanding exactly what is the messaging. Let's look at another thing that was raised the other day by the Council of Governors. They are saying that they have not been given their allocation for the last 4 or 5 months. And so you want to ask yourself, where is this money? If the allocation that is due to the counties has not been given to them, so that counties have not paid salaries for 3 or 4 months. And you all know that that is how you generate, I mean, when civil servants don't earn, yeah, it has a snowball effect, because in so many of the towns, it is the civil servants who are, you know, the kings, so to speak, in terms of having some purchasing power because of that. So there is an inconsistent and wrong message that is sent from the government.
Okay. So inconsistent messaging. Okay. Stephen, what's your assessment of where we are? And what do we need to do to get to where we want to be? Eric is saying inconsistent messaging. We would have liked to see something that shows us, you know, that we're headed in the right direction. But from the private sector, where are we?
Yvonne, we know that everything rises and falls on leadership. And that's where we need to start. That our leadership, both in the opposition and in government, and at all levels of government, starting from the lowest level up to the presidents, need to be bold enough to move Kenya to the next level. If you look at the challenges that we are facing as a country, they're not insurmountable challenges. They're not challenges that, if you look at the history of the world, they have never been there. We've had more greater challenges than even the challenges that we are having today. We've just come out of a COVID-19 pandemic, which literally brought the world to a stand. But still, when the people decided that is a challenge we are facing, we are going to work through and be able to overcome it. We are where we are. The economies are opening up. And so what do I say? First of all, where we need to start is to leave the blame game. Let's not blame whether it's the opposition, the current government, the former government, or is to take responsibility and say, we are in charge now. And we will not be judged by history of what our predecessors did, but what we have done to be able to change the situation in the country. Look at countries, if you look at countries like Singapore, China, and all that, they had visions and said, in one generation, we are going to transform these countries. That's the kind of leadership we need. That is the kind of visionary leaders we need to see. That is how we need our leaders, whether you're in opposition, you're in government, you are at any level, you are even at corporate level, to rise up and say, we are going to make a change in our lifetime. Now, the global problems that we are seeing is not Kenya the only country that is facing. The only difference that you will make between us and other countries is how we are going to respond to it, or how we are responding to it. Because the challenges will be there, and even as we move into the future, we are going to see more and more of those challenges, whether you're talking of global geopolitical development, whether it is between Russia in Ukraine or China. We see a lot of conflicts even in the offing and all that. But how do we respond as a country? A simple thing. Every challenge presents an opportunity, including the challenge we are having.
Including this one?
Yes.
Even with the challenges to employers and employees and...
Is an opportunity.
Okay.
Because you make a choice whether you're going to lament of the challenge or if you are going to make changes to face the uncertain times that you have. Now, to the country like Kenya, is an opportunity for, say, the challenge we are having in the protests and all that, is an opportunity for the government to say, wait a minute, is there something that we have missed to do that we can do better? Is the opposition to say, wait a minute, is this the way we want our country to move? And the leaders can be courageous enough. And this, for me, what I urge the president and the leader of the opposition, the Right Honorable Raila, and His Excellency the President Ruto, to be courageous enough and sit down and chart a path for this country. Okay. We know we have a manifesto that Kenya Kwanza government was elected on. At the end of the day, we're going to hold it accountable. In one of the many things that are in that manifesto is we are going to make the business environment to be more conducive so that we can have more business activities, we can have more productivity, we can have companies, our businesses growing and even becoming regional businesses. If you look at where we are now, at Africa level, we are negotiating the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and there is so many things that are happening there, and it is opening up the whole of African market. Are we preparing ourselves as an economy to be able to supply our products in that market? There is a commitment. There is a commitment if you look at the manifesto that jobs. Actually, the president summed up the manifesto into three things, and one of it was jobs creation. Now,
and you're the employers.
Yes, and we are the employers. And the government doesn't create jobs. Yeah. The government provides a conducive environment for the employers, the entrepreneurs to create jobs.
Do we have that conducive environment, do you think?
We have challenges.
Okay.
We have challenges that we need to deal with. Like just even what we are seeing, the protests, that's not a conducive environment for investment, it's not a conducive environment for employment. If you look at the various legislations that are being proposed, all of them are saying, can we have the employers or the businesses pay? You cannot tax yourself to prosperity. You have to reach a position, you say, we need to grow our economy so that it's not that we are taxing highly, but we have more that is coming in because the businesses are working. If you listen to the motions, I think it was on 23rd of this month in Parliament, and Senator Nyami is on record putting a motion and saying the cost of living is gone high. So what do we need to do? Let's increase the minimum wage by 50%. I mean, that's not how things work. You don't wake up in the morning and say, since the cost of unga, the cost of this has gone up. That you should
now empower the employees?
That is not empowering the employees. Minimum wage works only if three things hold. One, there has to be an ability for the employer to pay. That's very key. Because if the employer is not able to pay, he makes a decision that are going to affect the same employees. Either you render people redundant, or you go automation, or you just close shop. Is that what we need in the country? The second thing, it only works in an economy where majority of the wage employment is not informal. That's not the situation in Kenya. 84% of our economy is informal. How are you going to enforce that? Do you want to push even the formal businesses, the formal employment back into informality? I mean, that one is not prudent policy. You have to look at the whole labor sector and see what is going to be the impact of this. Now, we are in a state where the prices are rising. You can't help the employees or the workers by raising minimum wage when the prices are rising. So what we need to work out is how do we stabilize the prices, bring them down, increase productivity, make the employers to be able to pay higher wages, and when they negotiate what they are able to afford. Now, The other thing that we need to look at when it comes to government spending is just value for money. Where you spend that money, what kind of value are we getting from it? I'll be very happy if we are buying, say, furnitures. In the government says we have increased allocation for buying furnitures in government offices. If those furnitures are being manufactured in Kenya, are being produced by the businesses in Kenya, but if we are importing them from, say, China or whatever, then there is a problem there. I'll be.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You know, you're raising some very important points. I just want you to hold those thoughts for a moment, and because you're taking us in the direction where we're starting to see what's happening in the country and the conversation that we started with you, Eric and Stephen. But I just want you to hold that thought because I have another guest who's waiting on Zoom in Nakuru, and I'd like him to weigh in, and then we can come back and continue with the conversation. And I'd like us to now speak to Vincent Kimosop. Vincent Kimosop is a technical advisor to the National Council of Churches of Kenya, NCCK, and he joins me now live from Nakuru. Vincent, thank you. We have just been talking about where we are as a country, the state of the nation, the state of the economy, because those are the issues that are being raised, by the protesters in the country at the moment. Vincent, what's your sense of where we are as a nation? What's plaguing us? And where do we go from here?
Thanks for having me, Yvonne. I appreciate the opportunity. Greetings from Nakuru. I hope you can hear me well, even though far from Nairobi.
We can, thanks.
I want to say the following. One is that I want to quote a gentleman. It's actually is a Spanish American who was born, a Spaniard who was born in America. He said it's called George Santayana. He said those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And why am I saying this? Is that when we went to for the fight to get Kenya to be an independent country, there were things we were fighting for. People wanted dignity, people wanted to rule themselves, people wanted to manage their resources. But over time, Yvonne, we've actually seen challenges when it comes to the times of transitions. So what I can say is that we are where we are today. If we were to be truthful to one another, is we can revisit the issues that was raised in 2007. If you remember, what we call the Serena discussions, and we had four agenda items. Agenda number one was for us to be able to deal with the violence that was happening at that time. Agenda number two was give humanitarian aid to the people who were being affected. And then agenda number three was dealing with the political issue. And of course, that meant the formation of the Grand Coalition government. But Yvonne, if you could allow me, there was a big agenda called Agenda 4. And Agenda 4 had the following things. One was the need to undertake constitutional, legal, and institutional reforms, the need to tackle poverty and inequality and combat regional imbalances, tackle unemployment, particularly among the youth, and then why am I saying this, Yvonne? For me, we even have discussions, I told you we had it in Upper Eastern, now we are in Nakuru, is that we are not here by accident. The issues are not even the three that are before us, which is elections, cost of living, and the issue of public appointments. We have deep-seated issues as a country that we must confront. And we have started by having a constitution, but there are other things that if we do not address them, Yvonne, I can tell you, if you look beyond the current leaders of the two formation, we will be here 5 or even 10 years to go. I want to say, if we are not bold and courageous enough to address these issues at this point, what's going to happen? We will have a 4-year period. And if you remember what happened in 2007, the journey started in 2005. So I appeal to us, really, that we need to have a discussion and be able to see how to address the long-term issues and look beyond what is currently before us.
Yeah, Vincent, I just want to ask you, because you're saying, the issues that we have now, whilst valid, you're saying there's historical context to those issues. So what is the way forward? You know, Stephen Obiro, who's here with us, is saying, you know, the leaders from all sides should be courageous enough and sit down and have a conversation. Now, you hear one side saying they want dialogue. You hear another side saying there is no dialogue. This is the way we go forward. And to be honest, Vincent, we've had dialogue in this country before. This would not be the first time we're hearing calls for this. Should we go the dialogue way? What would that dialogue look like? How would it be different from what we've seen before?
We need to have an institutional approach to addressing these issues. We look at the history from 97, 2007 to 2018. If it is made a discussion between two individuals, one of the challenges that happens is that as soon as the interests at hand are addressed, we tend to forget our issues which plague us. So for me, I would go for an institutional approach. So leverage on parliament, leverage on technical institutions, and then allow those who are in the leadership to provide the political goodwill for the conversation to happen. With that, then therefore, we can confront long-term issues. Because you won't just imagine, if we don't address the issues of youth employment, it's young people who are on the street. If we don't address the issues of consolidating national unity, these are the issues that plague us. The other thing is about supporting devolution so that we address the issues of regional imbalances. So an institutional approach towards this, for me, would be my recommendation, where then we even have a very clear monitoring framework to addressing these long-term issues. Otherwise, if we don't do that, then we will be here again, 5 or even just beyond the current place.
Okay, Vincent, I know you are pressed for time, but just hang on for a moment, because I'd like to come back here and hear what Eric's thoughts are. You know, this is what Vincent is saying. We have historical issues. Do you agree with that standpoint? And he's talking about institutionalized talks that we've had before. What are your thoughts? Because there's a lot of people who say, you know, on the side of Kenya Kwanza, we're not going to have a handshake. It'll not be a nusu mkate government. You know, the protesters are saying, hey, we have a problem and we want to present our petition to government. Sit down and talk with us. What's the middle ground? What's the way forward from today?
Well, I think we have a problem in this country that we have not built institutions that we can trust. If you look at the police, their response to the issues that we are facing right now are highly political. They are characterized by the political sentiments of the government of the day, as opposed to looking at the greater issue in the country and what they are supposed to do. When you come to the institution, for example, of parliament, it has also, in as much as government is formed on the basis of who forms, who has the majority, Parliament also has a role in terms of oversight of the executive, and it doesn't matter whether it is in the government is quote unquote theirs, whether they're in government or not, but they have a constitutional duty to ensure that there is oversight of government and how government is using its resources. It is the failure by these oversight institutions that is putting us in the place that we are right now, so that any form of dialogue, of whatever dialogue, is not going to solve the problems that we are facing right now. Mm-hmm. We have to stop relying more on people and begin to focus on building the institutions that are supposed to be there to ensure that the country fulfills its potential and the potential that is there within the laws. So when you have, for example, a government that does not comply with the law, that there is a court order and you have a person as high-ranking as a deputy president leading in a breach of that court order, what are we talking about the institution? What is the message that we are sending? We are sending a message that this is a country that for those who then rule or who are in leadership, it is quote unquote their time to eat. And for as long as the government continues to behave as if it is their time to eat, those who are not in government will also be asking, can we just be sitting and watch these people eat for the next 5 years? If you look at the appointments, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. It looks like we have a general global problem. So
it is leadership. It is leadership. It is leadership. There's no other way to solve these problems, because we have laws. We have a constitution that says how leadership is supposed to be exercised, but no one wants to stick to the four corners of the constitution in terms of what leadership is, or how leadership is supposed to be exercised. So when you get into power, and the constitution tells you that as you set up your government, one, first consider merit, two, consider regional representation, consider balancing gender, youth, and all these considerations, and they are there in the constitution. And then you create a government that completely departs from what is provided for in the constitution, and you continue to defy with reckless abandon provisions of the law, court orders. You are basically promoting this level of disenfranchisement. Mm-hmm. So I think, for me, I'm not keen on this thing people are calling dialogue, because it is not going to solve the problem. So what we are dealing with, what we need to do is to just go back to the constitution and follow what our laws, the laws that we have set up for ourselves. Let us just follow that. Okay. If we do that, then all these issues will...
All right.
Yeah.
So we'll come back and talk about, if not dialogue, then what? Because, at the moment we have persons protesting, saying this is what we want, we're seeking dialogue. You have, others who are saying no dialogue. But how do we, move away from Mondays being what we are seeing, and now possibly Thursdays, we shall see later on in the week. We'll come back and talk about that in a minute. But let's, listen to what's actually happening out on the ground. And this is live in Kawangware. Our Stephen Leto is following this procession right now. Stephen, what can you tell us about where we are? We seem to have been in Kawangware for quite some time, for maybe the last half hour. How can you describe the situation right now?
It's been similar to a cat and mouse game between supporters of Azimio and their leaders versus the police who have been, erecting roadblocks inside Kawangware. So far, we've encountered several roadblocks, and the police and Azimio supporters have been engaged in some sort of ugly confrontation because we've had the water boozers spraying water on the supporters and the demonstrators as the demonstrators clashed back, stoning the water boozers, and that has been the situation. That is why we are still in Kawangware until this hour. And what is basically happening is that the Azimio entourage or demonstrators, they're sort of also trying to crisscross the streets within Kawangware, which they've attempted to go all the way down to
All right, so that's Stephen Leto, who is reporting and speaking to us live on phone from Kawangware. There seems to be some movement. We're seeing the leaders have gone back into their cars, so we'll catch up with Leto again in just a minute to find out what's going on. But he's talking about roadblocks that have been, erected around the city. So we will get back to that in a moment. So just give us a few minutes to establish what's really happening there. But we're here with Msamali. We'll get back to the conversation about, what happens. Is it dialogue? And if we're saying it is a matter of rule of law that needs to be respected, so how do we ensure that, duty bearers then, follow the law? We'll come back and talk about that. George, from a security standpoint, we're now talking about roadblocks. There's various people who say, even accessing certain parts of the city, you have to show your work ID. Are you here to work? What are your intentions? But look at this. How do we ensure that the routes are well known, that there is minimum disruption perhaps to those who are not part of the protest, those who are running their businesses? What would you say about the security installations that have been put up around the city with respect to this afternoon?
What I'll say is that the police are handling this the wrong way. As Eric said, it seems like the police have taken a political stand, and this is something that we tried to solve in 2010 when we came up with a new constitution. We said we needed an independent police service. We changed the name from the Kenya Police Force to National Police Service. And from my observation, from last Monday to today, it seems the police are not doing their balance act properly. It seems clearly that the police have taken sides, and that is exactly what is bringing this problem. If the police had followed the constitution, sat down with the organizers of the protests, agreed on some modalities, agreed on some points on where people will be allowed to assemble, how they will move.
The route they will take.
The route they will take.
Okay.
And then the police are supposed to be there to facilitate that movement.
Okay, just hang on 1 second. Sorry, we have Stephen Leto back. We'll come back to you in a minute to hear what he has to say. Stephen, we lost you for a moment. We hope you're okay. So you were telling us about the roadblocks and the procession that we're currently seeing?
Yeah, the police had attempted to block the demonstrators from accessing the 56th road in Kawangware. But as we speak now, that Raila Odinga-led demonstrators are currently have managed to access the road 56 in Kawangware, where they are just now, marching, upwards towards the road that leads to 46. To paint a picture for you, Yvonne, is should we get access to the junction that, leads to 46, the junction on 46, then there are only two options for the protesters to take the left turn and, use or come towards James Gishuru, or then take the right turn and go all the way to 46 at the end, or choose to go straight to access Ngong Road. That is the situation where we are, and we just want to see how have police barricaded that corner, and how will the protesters sneak their way. Will they go to the left towards the Yaya? Will they go straight towards Ngong Road, or will they take the right turn towards the 46, which goes all the way to Riruta? So that is where we are now. But so far we are getting any address, because there has been, police spraying water using the water boozers. Some of the cameras are destroyed, and also some of the sound systems might not also be working as of now, and that is what they're also trying to fix. That's why we are no longer making stops for the leaders to address, and so we will be, trying to see if we can get you the pictures of the junction up there. But the confrontation has been ugly back there. We've seen, water boozers coming to spray water on demonstrators, trying to disperse them, but they remain adamant, and they have been also stoning the water boozers and also trying to repulse the police officers who are stationed in those roadblocks, and that is why we've managed to access Road 56 here in Kawangware. And so we will just a matter of minutes before we know which way. Is it the way, the left way, or towards town? Is it the right towards 46 and Riruta satellite, or straight towards Ngong Road? Yvonne.
Yeah, and Stephen, do we know what the final destination or maybe final point of congregation is intended with this procession? Maybe, a place where they will meet, speak to their supporters, perhaps present a petition. Last week it was the KICC. Today, do we know what that final destination is?
Like I said, Yvonne, it's a cat and mouse game. The final destination is dependent on how the police officers barricade the road, how they manage to, overpower the police officers and cross the roadblocks like they have done here in Kawangware. And so it's still a wait and see whether they will, come to town. But, they have said that they will be presenting a petition either to the office of the president in Arambe House or to the office of the president in State House, Nairobi. Question is, how about when the the president is not in the country, will they go to the deputy president's office, or will they now not have any single petition to present and just, continue holding the demo to the protesters? And so that is also another key issue that we are so keen in trying to find out, Yvonne. But as and when we proceed, more and more leaders continue to join this entourage, because at the moment we've seen more leaders from Nyanza joining. We've seen the Nyando MP Jared Okello. We've seen the Migori Senator Eddie Okech. All of them also joining this entourage at the start of the 56. And of course, Kalonzo Musyoka is also in the entourage. And so we only just want to see what then is going to happen. Will they go to the town way? Will they go to Reruta satellite towards 46, or will they go straight to Ngong Road? And if they're coming to town, do they come to present a petition to office, and that is the office of the deputy president, who is now currently in office, in terms of State House versus Arambe House, and it's simply a matter of a wait-and-see situation, because their movement is also pegged on how police officers have barricaded roads.
Okay, Stephen, you've talked about police presence, and you've talked about the roadblocks. From the pictures that we are seeing now, you see the crowds of people and the leaders making their way. Could you speak to us about police and security presence in this procession that we are seeing live?
Basically, there are no police in the procession. There are no police officers in the procession to provide security. But what is happening is that they are stationed in particular points that are aimed to, deflect the Azimio supporters from, going that way. And so basically, they are stationed in specific points of entry, especially towards the side that tries to go through the sides of town. But I can confirm to Yvonne that there is a heavy police presence in Kawangware, in the entire Kawangware area. And once the Azimio demonstrators go one way, they will also, reroute and go to the other end, also to erect another roadblock. And so that is still the same way. Like I said, it's still a cat and mouse game between the protesters and the police officers manning this area.
Thank you, Stephen Leto, live there from Kawangware, following this procession that you're seeing live on your screens now. We'll link up with you once again when we get to that junction and we decide which way this is going. George, you were talking about, the security, the manner in which the security officials have conducted themselves. So, you look at this crowd and one would ask, so there's businesses in these areas, kiosks, shops, you name it, that, are obviously not able to do business here. How do we ensure, I think we're starting to talk about, the police talking about the route that you're going to use, the manner in which the police will provide security to allow the protesters to do their thing, but to also allow those who are not part of the protest to carry on with their work as usual.
Even what I'd say, like Vincent said, it seems we don't learn from history. And I remember I was part of the police when we were dealing with the Sabasaba riots. And basically, the tactic we're using in 2023 is exactly what we used in 1991. We blocked people from getting into the city. They wanted to get to Kamkunji, go and protest. We declared that a gathering illegal, and then we locked people in the informal settlements. And you saw what happened. There was a lot of damage. People were killed. There was a lot of fighting in Dandora, Mathare North, all that. And we didn't realize that by not allowing people to picket, then we are causing a problem to the country, not only for the police, because that time the police took sides. And this informed the decision to have an independent police service in the 2010 Constitution. But in 2014, people went back to Parliament and said, no, we should have the police under the control of the executive. And the appointment of the Inspector General is no longer independent right now. The Inspector General is an appointee of the President. The Deputy Inspector General equally is an appointee of the President. So these people are taking orders from the executive. So they are not independent in any way, and that is why it was very difficult for them to come and sit down with the Azimio group and agree on how these protests are going to be carried out. Agree that we are going to provide security so long as you people do this within the confines of the law. Don't break any laws. But if you look at what is happening in Kawangware, look at what happened in Isili last week. So many people are, I mean, a lot of businesses were disrupted, and that is a dent to the economy, an economy that is struggling. If only the police had followed the law, allowed people to protest properly, follow the laid down procedures of dealing with a crowd, that is crowd management, not crowd control, because when you're trying to control a crowd, it means you want to disperse that crowd. But if you're managing a crowd, you are giving them that opportunity to picket peacefully. But from the onset, we saw the Inspector General coming out and clearly saying, now we are not going to manage this crowd, we are going to control the crowd. And when you do that, use that kind of tactic, this is what will happen. And you will see these people are saying by hook or crook, we will pass. And do we have enough police to manage such a crowd?
Yes, a question.
It's even costing the economy, because deployment alone, I've seen police being ferried from other parts of the country to come and deal with.
And not to mention, we have an ongoing operation in the northern part of Kenya,
that is it.
Which is obviously taking up a considerable number of security officials. I want to still stay on the issue of operations, Eric, and let's talk about this for a minute, because there is this statement that is from the Ministry of Interior and National Administration and by the CS, and it's talking about plans to manage such situations better. Let me just go through it briefly. So they say they want to introduce what they're calling subsidiary legislation in the form of regulations to the Public Order Act and the Statutory Instruments Act, which will deal with such issues like notification procedures that you talked about, the duties of security agents to protect those who are protesting, the demarcation of assembly and petition zones, the duty of public agencies and institutions, the duty of the organizers of assemblies and demonstrations, amongst other things. So let's talk about this. Perhaps you can explain to us the context